Bhante, we want to know the relationship between Brahmaviharas, Jhanas, and the steps in Paticca Samuppada. What are their relationships? Can all three be put together in one sort of relationship? Four Brahmaviharas, four Jhanas, and steps in Paticca Samuppada.
Well, the first thing to understand is that we need to go through the jhanas to get a full comprehension of the Paticca Samuppada. The jhanas is the way to gain that. There are two ways of beginning to understand the Paticca Samuppada. What are you writing down? Huh? Okay. You see how the Buddha became a Buddha is important to understand. You know that the Prince Siddhartha left the palace and went into the forest and learned from two advanced meditators, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. They had reached a high level of jhanas and samadhi. And when we talk about the jhanas, it is important to understand that what are called the first four jhanas they are what are called affective states. Now we spoke of two things, the affective and the cognitive. The affective is the emotional part and the cognitive is the thinking part. You remember that, huh? Now, the four jhanas are a process of calming down the affective part. And the other sadhana, sometimes people call jhanas, but that is not jhanas. Because they are called ayatanas. Akasananchayatana, Viññananchayatana, Akinchanyayatana, Neva Sanya Nasanyayatana. They are called ayatanas, not jhanas. The difference is that the jhanas are a calming down of the cognitive process, calming down of the affective process. But what are called ayatanas are a calming down of the cognitive process. That is the important thing to understand. So, Alara Kalama and Uddakarama Putta had gone beyond the jhanas and they have been attaining high levels of the ayatanas. So they both had reached what is called Akinchanyayatana. Now the first one is Akasanantayatana, means infinite space. Do you know what that means? You see, you have to understand what that means. You see, dhyana means when you have freed the mind of the hindrances, which are emotional states, what are called the 5 hindrances, kama, chanda, vyapada, tina, midda, uddacha, kukkucha. These are emotional states. To get rid of those hindrances means the emotional states which are agitations of the body and mind is stopped. That means calmness is something that is shaking has stopped. You understand? And in that stopping, when the hindrances are gone, what is in the mind is what we call the jhanangas. What are jhanangas? Vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekagata. What we call vitakka, vichara is conceptual thinking. That means we ask a question, what is this? This is a book. What is this? Is the question. This is a book is the answer. And that is the formation of a concept. That is what we call thinking. What we call thinking is the formation of a concept. So in the first jhana, the mind is free of emotional disturbances, but there is conceptual thinking. When you enter the second jhana, that conceptual thinking stops. That means you don't ask, what is this? You don't come to the conclusion, this is a book. You might see the book, but you don't ask the question, what is this? You don't answer the question, this is a book. You see? Because if your eyes open, you might see it. But you don't ask the question or answer the question. That is, thinking is not there. So in the second jhana, you have only priti, sukha and ekaggata. Priti is a happiness of the mind, and sukha is the comfort of the body, and ekaggata means the mind is not divided. Huh? When you enter the third jhana, priti disappears. So that happiness is not there anymore at that point. Because the happiness is seen at that point as excitement. Happiness is seen as an excitement, and so you drop the happiness. But that doesn't mean that you become unhappy. Unhappy is also an excitement. Then it comes under the nivaranas. You don't get back to nivaranas. So there is no unhappiness, there is no happiness. Mind is very calm and still. When you come to the fourth jhana, the comfort is also gone. That doesn't mean that you become uncomfortable. It is a neutral state. No comfort, no uncomfort. But your mind is focused because the ekaggata is there. Ekaggata means the mind is united. So the mind is focused on an object. You understand? So if the mind is focused on an object, the object is seen, no? If your mind is focused on an object, the object is seen, but you don't think about the object. That thinking part is gone. But you can see the object. You understand? So in the fourth jhana, you can see the object. But there is also another thing in the fourth jhana. Ekaggata and upekka. Upekka means seeing the inside. What is the inside? It is turned inwards. What is the in? That is the process of seeing. So you are able to look at not the object, but you are also able to see the process of seeing. You understand? So the inside is the process of seeing. So there is seeing the object and also the process of seeing. Now what happens is, now that is in the fourth jhana. Now you begin to go beyond that fourth jhana. Then what happens is, you take your attention away from the object that is seen. And you focus on the process of seeing. So when you take your attention away from the object, what do you see? You don't see any objects. That is, in other words, you are seeing only empty space. That is what is called akasananchayatana. Akasa. Akasa means empty space. Then, now you focus your attention on the process, and that process of perception is what is called vijnanam. So you begin to see the process of perception. That is called vijnananchayatana. So you are aware of the process of perception. Then the next stage is you give up that process of perception also. Then what are you seeing? You are seeing nothing. So seeing nothing is what is called akinchanyayatana. Akincha means nothing. So you are seeing nothing. Akinchanyayatana. So Alara Kalama had come to that point. You understand? So he wanted to go further, so Alara Kalama could not teach him to go beyond that. So he went to the other person, Uddakarama-putta. Uddakarama-putta said, I have also only come to that same point. But my teacher, who died, had reached another point. So I can only tell you what my teacher taught me. If you want, you can try to get into that state. So, this our seeker who became the Buddha now said, okay, you tell me what your teacher taught you, I will try it. And he tried. And that is, he gave up the akinchanyayatana. And that is the state called neva sanya na sanyayatana. So he reached that point, neva sanya na sanya, which means neither perception nor no perception. Neva sanya na sanyayatana. So he reached that state. And then this Uddakarama-putta said, okay, you have now reached my teacher's state. So I will treat you as my teacher. You stay here. He said, no, I am not interested in being your teacher. I want to go beyond this point. So he said, I am not able to help you anymore. That is how he decided to go and try the asceticism. So he went and met these 5 ascetics. Kondanya, Badhya, Vappa, Mahanama, Asaji. 5 people who were practicing asceticism. So he thought, Now I'll try asceticism and see, because he couldn't go beyond that. So he started fasting. So he fasted till he became a skeleton. You know about that story. So he fasted, and then he thought, still he has not been able to understand this. I will try to stop breathing. So he stopped breathing. You know what happens when you stop breathing? If you are able to stop breathing, you will die. So, but he stopped breathing to a long period and he went unconscious. So when he went unconscious, he can't stop breathing, no? The breathing automatically happens. So somehow after becoming unconscious, he again became conscious. So when he became conscious, he began to think, I have tried the worst kind of asceticism that I can do. I didn't become enlightened. And he thought, all these days I was making a big mistake. I have been practicing all these paramitas. Through many lives I have been making sacrifices of all kinds. And now I am trying to learn from other people. That is the mistake I am making. And then he began to remember when he was a small child, when there was this period where the celebration of the what do you call? Huh? Huh? Ploughing, yeah. That ploughing ceremony. At that time, as a child, he automatically entered the first jhana. And then he thought, that is what I should be doing. Why am I trying to do what other people are doing? That was a very happy state. And being happy, there doesn't mean that I am going after sensual pleasures. It was a happiness which was not going after sensual pleasures. It was a happy state of the mind. So there is nothing wrong in becoming happy. So I will enter that state. So he entered again the first jhana. Then he went to the second jhana. Then he went to the third jhana. Then he went to the fourth jhana. Then from there again he went to the infinite space. Went to the infinite perception. Then went to the nothingness. Then went to the the nothingness. Then from nothingness he went to neither perception or non-perception. And he gave up that also. So it's all a process of giving up. And then he gave up sensation and perception. He had only to go one step further. And he went that one step by giving up. So that is the important thing that he practiced, was the giving up, letting go. That's the important thing to understand. So when he did the giving up, he entered that state, and that state means he became completely unconscious. There was no consciousness of any kind at that point. So the mind stopped. So in other words, what is called the mind is not another entity separate from the body. It is an activity of the body. And so, from that state, he woke up again. So, when he wakes up from that state, what happens? He comes back to neither perception nor non-perception again. Then from that, he went back again to nothingness, then to the perception, infinite perception, the infinite space, went back to the fourth jhana, went back to the third, then to the second, then to the first. The moment he came back like that, he began to see how the mind is working. And what he saw was how from a state of not knowing anything, he comes to become conscious. So it is at the fourth jhana that he begins to think again, no? Conscious. And with that consciousness, he began to see how all the senses begin to work, and you begin to comprehend or identify objects. These various things are identified. These are table, these are chair, and so on. And the whole world is identified that way. And then from there, then you begin to like and dislike what you have identified. The moment you begin to like and dislike, you begin to personalize that liking and disliking. That is what is called upadana. And then once you personalize, you come into existence. A self comes into existence. And once the self has come into existence, you begin to identify the self as the body. And then the body becomes something that occupies space and time. And then you begin to see that the body has a past, present and future, which means birth, aging and death. And with that comes suffering. So in other words, he saw the Paticca Samuppada. So it is when he saw the Paticca Samuppada that he began to understand that this whole world and the self is all created by this process of perception. And it is not a reality. The world that we are aware of is not a reality. So you see the connection between the jhanas and the ayatanas, and how ultimately the Paticca Samuppada is understood. It is only when the Paticca Samuppada is properly understood that you awaken from the dream of existence.